Hi everyone, my name is Emily Calcraft. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Sheffield and I specialise in the interwar British pacifist movement. I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation to speak today, and it's a joy to share this part of my work with you. So I was interested in the role of sport in peaceable relations because it's been treated with a lot of criticism, and a lot of people say it's naive to assume that a football match or a European Championship could provide enough kind of international cordiality to limit or to end conflict. And this has influenced the attention that historians have given to the nexus of sport, peace, and war. And so I sought to explore this by looking at the British pacifist movement, whose emphasis on sport and physical fitness has been neglected traditionally. So my work surveyed the work of pacifists and internationalists on a grassroots national and international level and sought to identify how pacifists interacted with sport and physical fitness and how perceptions of international sport changed in the face of escalating conflict in the 1930s. So I looked at the British pacifist movement to get a sense of how the relationship just between peace and sport altered as pacifism as a political ideology developed in that time. So I focused on the work of two anti-war groups, the League of Nations Union and the Peace Pledge Union, and these two groups were the most popular and influential anti-war groups in Britain at the time. The LNU were formed to supplement the work of the newly founded League of Nations, and its membership peaked in 1931 with 400,000 members. Its commitment to peace was based on the founding of a liberal internationalist order. By contrast, the Peace Pledge Union emerged at a time when pacifism was becoming increasingly questioned due to the rise of Nazism, the Spanish Civil War, and the failure of collective security. The PPU was more of a faith-like vision in the power and the potential of absolute pacifism. So to move on closely now to look at the League of Nations Union. So they use sport in a way to foster world citizenship and internationalism. And that spirit was epitomised, as we've mentioned earlier, through the modern iteration of the Olympic Games. So many individual Olympic athletes were also involved in the League of Nations and its union. So for instance, in Britain, Eric Liddell, who was memorialised in Chariots of Fire, broke the 400-metre record and then went on to become a Christian missionary in China. Perhaps the most notable Olympian and interwar peace activist, Noel Baker, was instrumental within the LNU as well. And these individual athletes saw themselves as peace missionaries. For instance, there was a member called D.G. Lowe who organised a tour of the athletic club to Germany after the war to foster Anglo-German relations and to repatriate. To inculcate this kind of ethos beyond the athletes themselves, the LNU also used branch meetings for local sporting events. They held open air meetings, they did cycling, dancing, and swimming galas. And they also took advantage of the new commercialised nature of sport. So in 1932, the Walthamstow branch got members of the Arsenal football team to attend. And in 1934, some ballot organisers did a speech at the Bury versus Port Vale football match as well. And so they felt that commercial and professional sport could help pacifism to reach a larger audience and to transform untouched pockets of public attention. The Peace Pledge Union differed because it was a more absolute form of pacifism, and so they advocated for the use of sport to test an individual's commitment to pacifism, and so they favoured the use of non-violent activities such as rambling and folk dancing. The PPU was founded just months before the 1936 Olympic Games, and Nazism had given new significance to the Olympics due to its scale, presentation of symbolism, and its controversiality. But the tension arising in international politics had undermined the previous consensus that the Olympics had the power and the potential to stave off war. And so prominent pacifists began to localise their approaches and to question commercialised sport as a passive and corrupted pastime. Modernity, industry, and commercialised sport were deemed to be the antithesis to nature and peace. And so the movement attempted to train non-violent individuals through sport. They became fixated with folk dancing due to an American pacifist named Richard Gregg, and they promoted walking and rambling as a way of connecting with the countryside. They also used, similar to the LNU, they used cycling, dancing, and cricket during branch meetings, and they rejected violent sports like hunting. So what this story really tells us is about the role of sport in reaching large public audiences, in distilling complex notions into recognisable tropes, and subtly instilling ideals. And that was recognised by peace activists in the 1920s and 30s. And so both organisations used physical activities to create an anti-war community that united in favour of internationalism and that stood against violence and militarism. So where sport had been used to create an international kinship, the Peace Pledge Union, a more absolute form of pacifism, harked back to a very localised and rural past that was rooted in a middle-class idealism. To the LNU, however, sport was valuable in engendering an international kinship and fostering the kind of world citizen ethos. Both groups, however, aligned sport with the values of peace, such as humility in defeat and cordiality, and the notion of sportsmanship and fair play. But this altered as pacifism became more absolute, and sport became a way of testing pacifism against the backdrop of resurgent militarism and international crises in the later 1930s. And so this prompted an alternative vision of manhood and masculinity as well. Thank you very much. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for your agreement that you agreed to participate in our conference. I think that your theme and your topic is really important and will be helpful also in different research, your methods which you use and so on. I think that we should also cooperate more closely in the future to provide such maybe mutual support and exchange of knowledge. I think it's also important. So thank you once again.